This is Ravinder Dundra and welcome to my channel. In this video lecture, we will discuss about class 6th second chapter geography, that is globe, latitudes and longitudes. You all must be very eager to know about some of the interesting facts about our earth. What is the shape of the earth and what are these latitudes, what are these longitudes. Come, let's learn about some of the important facts of earth. So, what is this globe? Globe actually, it represents the true shape of our earth. Whenever you see a globe, you can just imagine that our earth exactly almost looks like a globe. That's why sometimes people also refer globe as the true shape of our earth. Then, what is the shape of our earth? The shape of our earth is something we call it as this sphere. But the shape of the earth, it is not actually exactly completely like a sphere. Somewhat it is bulging in the middle. Bulging in the middle means, suppose if you take any ball, like it may be volleyball, basketball or football, just you put your hands on the top of the ball and below the ball, and if you press like this, you can see some kind of bulge in the ball. So that is what the shape of our earth. So that is the reason why the polar diameter of the earth is 44 kilometers shorter than the equatorial diameter. What is this equatorial diameter and polar diameter? Is that, suppose if just imagine it is the shape of the earth, if you measure the diameter of the earth from this end to this end, it will be somewhat 44 kilometers shorter than the diameter from here to here. So that is why there is a short distance of 44 kilometers in the diameter. Then on on which axis this earth rotates, or in which point the earth rotates? Our earth rotates on an imaginary line or imaginary needle known as axis. So this you can take as the imaginary needle on which our earth is rotating. We call this imaginary line as this axis or imaginary needle as axis. And end point of the axis of the earth are called poles. That means the end points here, the end point of this axis, the end point of this axis, these two things are known as this poles. And the northern part of this is known as north pole and southern part is known as this south pole. And other thing about is that there is an imaginary line that divides our earth into two equal parts, that we call it as this equator. It is all an imaginary. Axis is imaginary line and also the equator is also imaginary line. And this equator, it represents 0 degrees and it divides our earth into two equal parts. And northern part of this equator, we call it as this northern hemisphere, and the southern part of this equator, we call it as this southern hemisphere. Next we will see about this parallels and meridians. What are these parallels, or we also call them as latitudes? What are these meridians? We also call them as this longitudes. These parallels and meridians. So let us discuss about parallels and meridians. These parallels, you can also call them as latitudes, and these meridians, you can also call them as this longitudes. So let us see what are these latitudes or parallels. Parallels are those circles that run from west and eastern direction and are parallel to the equator. These are known as this parallels. That means those circles which are running from west to the eastern direction and which are parallel to this equator, 0 degree equator, those circles are known as this parallels, or we also call them as this latitudes. So the other name of this parallels is latitudes, which are running from west to the east and which are parallel to the equator. Then circles that run from north pole to the south pole are known as meridians, or we also call them as this longitudes. Here if you see from north pole to south pole, there are some circles which are running from south pole to north pole to south pole, or north pole to south pole. So these circles are known as this meridians, or we also call them as this longitudes. Then what is the use? As I mentioned, these parallels and meridians are all these are imaginary lines. in reality on the globe you cannot find them. But what is the purpose of these lines? Why they are useful? Why they are useful is that it is because the parallels and meridians that can be used to define the directional location of any place. For example, if you would like to visit any place, or if you want to know exact location of any place, we will use this latitudes and longitudes to decide that, to tell the location of a place. For example, you can see, for example, India is located here somewhere. Just imagine. So if someone asked you what is the location of India, you can say between these latitude, which latitude it is. You can take there are some latitudes between which India is located, that is not necessary for you, but you can say that simply between so and so latitudes and so longitudes you can find this India. So like this, to locate any place, to find the direction of any place, we use this latitudes and longitudes. And all these latitudes and longitudes, they intersect each other at 90 degrees. You see, all these latitudes, suppose these are longitudes, these are latitudes, all are intersecting each other at 90 degrees. Here or wherever you see, they are all intersecting each other at 90 degrees. And all this network of parallels and meridians, we call it as this grid. Grid means you can simply say it looks like this. If these are longitudes and these are latitudes, so this we call it as this grid. The network of meridians and parallels is known as this grid. You can see, for example, if you want to locate any place, you can locate by using these latitudes and longitudes. Let us discuss in detail about this parallels or latitudes. So to represent any parallel, any location or any latitude, how we express is that we always express them in degrees. For example, you are saying so and so place is located between two latitudes. So how do we express that latitude is that we show that latitude by using some degrees. For example, between 3 degrees and 5 degrees, so and so place is located. Between 2.5 degrees and 1.5 degree, there is a place is located, or from 8 degrees and 37 degrees there is a place is located. So like this, we express all the latitudes in degrees, and there are total of 360 degrees in a circle. You all know there are total 360 degrees in a circle, and in that 1 degree here it is almost equal to 60 minutes, and 1 minute is representing 60 seconds. Then which is the starting point to measure all these degrees? There should be some starting point to measure all these latitudes. So now we have taken equator as the starting point to measure all these latitudes. Equator, you all know, it represents 0 degrees. So 0 degree equator is taken as the starting point to represent all these latitudes. And the distance between the equator and the north pole is 1/4 of a circle. Just imagine that our earth is like a circular shape, and this is 0 degree and this is north pole. So from here to here, the distance from here to here, if you want to measure the distance, if it is total circle, there are 4 parts are there. So in that, this distance if you want to measure, it shows something like 1/4, because out of 4 parts, 1 part shows the distance from north pole to this equator. So that is why this latitude of north pole, it represents 90 degrees here. That's why we say why north pole is 90 degrees and why south pole is 90 degrees is because it is 1/4 of the distance between north pole to this equator is 1/4 of this circle. That is why it represents this 90 degrees. And there are almost 180 parallels on the earth are there, including this equator. How 181 parallels are there, how 181 latitudes are there is that if you measure from 0 degree to the top up to north pole, there are 90 degrees are there, 90 latitudes, and from here to here again there are again 90 latitudes are there. So total 180 are there, plus 0 degree latitude, that is equator. So total of 181 degrees or 181 parallels are there on this globe. And now let us see some of the important characteristics of these latitudes. Let us discuss some of the important characteristics of these parallels. So let us begin. The first character, all the parallels are complete circles except 90 degrees north pole and 90 degrees south pole. That means if we see all these parallels, all these latitudes, they are complete circles except this north pole as well as south pole, because they are just points, end points. This north pole is an end point as well as south pole is also an end point. Except these two things, remaining all other parallels, they are complete circles. That means they will make a complete circle on this globe. Then second one is equator is the largest parallel and the length of the other parallels decrease towards the pole. That means the only largest parallel is that 0 degree parallel, that is equator, and remaining all the latitudes, as they move towards the poles, either in the southern pole or in the northern hemisphere or in the southern hemisphere, their size gets decreased. So as you see here, the size of the each latitude is getting decreased, and here also it is getting decreased. So as they move on towards the northern pole or as they move on towards the southern pole, their size gets decreased, and the only largest latitude is, that is equator, which is having 0 degrees. Then all parallels are located at an equal distance from each other. That means the distance between each parallel is the same. From here to here the distance is same, and from here to here also the distance is same. So all the parallels, their distance is between each parallel, the distance is similar. Then the equator is the only great circle, while all other parallels are smaller circles. As just now as I mentioned, as they move on towards the northern pole as well as southern pole, their size gets decreased. Like this, their size gets decreased. So that is why the only greatest circle, the largest circle is, that is equator. That is why we also call this equator as the great circle. Then the last very important feature is that the distance between any two parallels at an interval of 1 degree is about 111 kilometers. That means between each latitude, for example, this is 1 degree latitude and this is 2 degree latitude. So from here to here, between two latitudes which are having a difference of at least 1 degree, the distance is about 111 kilometers. That means suppose you are traveling from here to here, when you cross 111 kilometers, automatically you are changing from 1 degree to the another degree latitude. So these are some of the important features of this parallels or important characteristics of these latitudes. In the next lecture we will discuss about these different heat zones of the earth, as well as we will discuss in detail about these meridians, or also we also call it as these longitudes. Thank you.